The San Jose Sharks have a roster. Who made it? Who didn't make it? And why is it so flippin' weird?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Western Conference Tuesdays here on the Locked On NHL channel. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Proudly part of the Locked On Network, cover your team every day. If you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube as well. And today we have a roster. After a whole offseason of arguing who should be on the team and who shouldn't, who should play with who, we have something to start with. So we'll look at who made the roster, look at players who just missed and kind of when we might see them, and how the Sharks are going to kind of navigate and try to get some flexibility as they have the very rare 15 forwards, 6 defensemen, 2 goalies. So we'll discuss that as well. So before we do get to all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com. So let's start before we even get to it. Our beloved Danil Gushchin making the opening night roster. Just so happy to see for Gushchin, who's, again, just a guy who's worked hard since he got in here. And I have a soft spot for Danil Gushchin, right? If you follow me on Twitter at MyFryHole, shameless plug, you guys know I've been kind of clipping games for the last kind of couple of seasons. Gushchin and Gannon Larocque were kind of the first guys that I was like, when they came from their respective junior teams to the Barracuda. And that's when I kind of first started clipping games, was so I could watch these guys. So Gushchin has like a soft spot because watching him as a itty bitty baby coming straight from the Ice Dogs to a very bad Barracuda, going from a bad Ice Dogs team to a bad Barracuda team. And watching and just being like, surprised, like I knew about the shot, right, but being surprised at like the playmaking ability, which we of course saw the other night. It's like watching one of your children do something nice. So extremely happy for Danil Gushchin to make the Sharks. Well deserved. If he wasn't hurt last year, he probably would have gotten more time in the NHL. Like he's we'll talk about the lines and everything here in a little bit, but I'm just super happy for Gushchin to at least get an opportunity making the opening night roster and show that he belongs in the NHL. So without further ado, let's get to the actual roster itself. So if you're watching on YouTube, I have the graphic up. If not, I will, of course, read it. This is in order of jersey number. Among the forwards, Will Smith, Nico Sturm, Klim Kostin, Luke Kunin, Fabian Zetterlund, Alexander Wenberg, Barclay Goodrow, Ty Dellandrea, Giovanni Smith, Mikael Granlund, Macklin Celebrini, William Eklund, Tyler Toffoli, Danil Gushchin, and Carl Grundstrom. So 15 forwards. I thought they would go with 14. We will talk about this here in a little bit, but defensemen, Henry Thrun, Cody Ceci, Matt Benning, Mario Ferraro, Jan Ruda, and Jake Wallman. And then the goaltenders, Mackenzie Blackwood and Vitek Vanacek. No surprises there. The injured non-rostered players, Thomas Bordeleau, Igor Chernyshov, Lucas Carlson, Logan Couture, Mark Edward Vlasic, and Shakir Mukhamadullin. So let's start with those guys. We'll start with the injured guys first, and we'll kind of work our way through it here. So no surprises with Couture, who's already been put on IR. Same thing with Mark Edward Vlasic. Both those guys are on IR, and Thomas Bordeleau, I believe, is also on IR per Puckpedia. As I'm pulling it up right now, just double checking. So those guys are on IR. at the moment. Bordeleau and Vlasic are both skating and are considered week to week. So we'll put a pin in those guys and kind of see when they start to rejoin practice and stuff. So no rush there, I think, especially for both those guys. Who Vlasic, we kind of know what he's going to be. And I know Bordeleau, I assume when Bordeleau gets back, they're probably going to let him kind of warm up with the Barracuda and then kind of go from there. So thought that's kind of that. Logan Couture, right? We know we know with Couture, it's long term. And until we hear otherwise, we just assume Couture's not going to be around. Igor Chernyshov, again, he had shoulder surgery. I'm not sure if he's in San Jose or if he's in Saginaw. I'm not sure where he is right now. He's expected to be out until kind of halfway through the season and then should go back to Saginaw and to play, or should go, not back to, but should report to Saginaw here and play kind of the end of the season with the Saginaw Spirit in the OHL. So Lucas Carlson has been dealing with something. Once he is injured or once he's returned, like he'll have to go through waiver process and then get sent down to the Barracuda, where he'll is expected to play a big role in there. But the Barracuda have a fair amount of defensemen right now. I don't think they should be looking okay. The interesting one though is Shakir Mukhamadullin. I guess I can. So Mukhamadullin is practicing with the team right now, but they're just kind of, I think we'll talk about the flexibility here in a little bit, but I think what they were doing is they were just kind of waiting to see if there's anybody on waivers worth potentially claiming and try to give themselves the most flexibility. That's why they didn't put anybody themselves on waivers. I think right now the Sharks wanted to kind of hold pat. So with Mukhamadullin, who is started to practice, he was over the weekend, he was out there for an optional skate. Practice today was kind of rotating in among the defensemen. I think for him, we'll know more probably on Thursday with the Sharks and what they plan to do with Mukhamadullin. Thursday, Friday, like kind of those days, and if he is going to be ready to jump into action here soon, especially for a guy who hasn't practiced at all during training camp. So those are, I think, are kind of the intriguing guys. But I would expect Mukhamadullin, if he's already practicing now, probably within sometime in the next week to be playing games, whether they're in the NHL or in the AHL. That's to be determined there. But I just think it's interesting that they're trying to, I think, kind of push off decisions right now when it comes to flexibility. No surprises in the defense other than that they only carried 6. But I think with them starting the season in San Jose, that they can, if they need a defenseman right away, you can just call up a defenseman. That's the nice thing about having your AHL team literally in the same building that you work out in, is that if you need a guy, you can literally just grab a guy. And if it's Jack Thompson or Luca Cagnoni, I assume it would probably be Jack Thompson. We'll talk about the bubble players and the guys who just missed here in a little bit. But I think that's kind of the thinking for them, is if they need somebody right away, they can grab somebody right away for the Sharks. So, but the Sharks decided to keep 15 forwards. And we kind of knew, we knew which guys were going to make it. It was coming down to kind of the bubble guys for the Sharks, right? We knew like Celebrini and Smith, Eklund, like Toffoli. We knew all those guys were going to make it, but it was going to be like your Carl Grundstroms, your Ty Dellandrias, Klim Kostins, your Danil Gushchin, and then Giovanni Smith. I think they were all kind of in that bucket together of, okay, who's the odd man out? Well, with the Sharks going 15-6 right now, they were able to keep everybody. But they're going to have to make some room here at some point because it's not sustainable to keep 15 forwards and only 6 defensemen, especially if you go on a long road trip and I think they're going to have to waive at least one defenseman or one forward if you're not going to, if Danil Gushchin is going to be in your lineup, and you expect him to be in your lineup because he's on the power play 2 unit. You expect like Macklin, Celebrini, Smith aren't going anywhere either. You're going to have to waive one of these veteran guys and see, kind of gamble to see like, okay, is anybody going to claim him? I don't think like none of these guys really, I think, kind of move the needle when it comes to players potentially being grabbed and stuff, but it is something the Sharks are going to have to do. So we'll look at we'll talk about some of the flexibility, how they're going to gain some flexibility here in a little bit. I also want to talk about the guys who just missed the cutoff here and kind of expectations and when we might start to see them as well. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. Hey, NFL fans, if you want to start the season with a big return, you need to check out FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And again, until Tua gets back, keep hammering the unders. I know the Dolphins are on bye this week, but they're still going to find a way to hit the under, even if they're not playing a game. Don't ask. They're just going to do it. So you can check out all that and more over at FanDuel.com. All right, guys, before we continue, we look at the roster players and then how the Sharks are going to navigate this flexibility. Do want to thank you, of course, for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. For your second listen, go check out one of the other great shows here at the Locked On Network. Of course, you have Locked On NHL, where I'm on every Tuesday. Seth and I, we've been doing Western Conference things. I think we're going to give our Tuesday, we'll have our playoff predictions on who we think is going to make the playoffs out of the Western Conference. Spoiler, not the Sharks. So go check out that. You can go check out the NHL prospects as they start to gear up for the 2025 draft. You have NHL fantasy, plenty of great stuff here on the Locked On NHL channel, wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. All right. So the players that just missed, and right, you feel bad for these guys because I don't think they're among these guys like any of them where you were like, you could have easily talked me into, yep, that guy could have definitely been on the roster. And, this doesn't mean that these guys are never going to be on the Sharks, right? So the guys who were reassigned to the Barracuda today, defenseman Luca Cagnoni, Jack Thompson, Ethan Cardwell, and Collin Graf. So we'll start with the defensemen, and then we'll work our way to the forwards. Because Luca Cagnoni and Jack Thompson, I think those guys had the strongest case to be on the Sharks. And Luca Cagnoni, we've spent a lot of time talking about like what he can do and his timeline and why I think he will play NHL games. I understand, as great as he was in the preseason, you don't want to rush a prospect, and I get that. And I know this season is going to be a long season for the Sharks, but he still has plenty of issues, and that is what the AHL is for, is to help iron out those issues. And he's going to have a big role in the AHL this season, and I think he's going to do great in the AHL as he gets ready for NHL time here. So I'm as high, if anybody's listened to the show over the past year, I'm as high on Luca Cagnoni as can be. I'll say it before, I'll say it again. With small defensemen like him, they're either amazing or they never make it. I'm in the camp that he's going to be amazing. I think we've seen so many flashes in the NHL preseason, but I just, it's a big jump from going straight from the WHL to the NHL. Let him get his feet wet in the NHL, playing, or in the AHL, playing regular season games, playing every night. And I think Cagnoni's going to be just fine for the Barracuda. I still expect him to play. Jack Thompson right now, I think, is the first man up when it comes to if there's an injury or anything like that. I think he's the next guy because he got his taste of the NHL last year, played a bunch of huge minutes for the Barracuda after the trade. And he's a little bit older, right? And you kind of want to see a guy like him. How does he he's kind of put his time in the AHL, and he's going to be that next guy, I think, knocking on the door, especially if we think Shakir Mukhamadullin kind of secures his spot. So I think for Thompson, it's a matter of when, not if, he's in the NHL, and can he hold on to a job into the NHL. So not worried about those guys. I think both those guys will see NHL time this year. I think also this Barracuda team is going to be super fun when you have, your defenseman on the Barracuda right now. You have Jimmy Schultz, Luca Cagnoni, Jack Thompson, Jake Furlong, and then Gannon Larocque, who's looked really good in the preseason as well. Ethan Frisch, who I really like as well. Like, this defensive core looks really, really fun, and I think this Barracuda team is going to be really, really fun. At least that's the fingers crossed, right? I think we need to have. We're overdue on a good Barracuda team. So among the forwards, no surprises. I'm happy to see Ethan Cardwell last as long as he did and be one of the last cuts. He had himself a tremendous preseason and tremendous camp. And I think it's always difficult, I think, for players kind of going from being the guy in juniors, right? And that's how most of these players are, right? You look at what they do in juniors and then having to kind of transition to a different role when you become a professional, right? Not everybody can be a scorer. Like, I think it's a different mentality, and some players do well with it and some players struggle. I think Ethan Cardwell is just that dude that's whatever you need me to do, I'm going to do it 1,000% at 100 miles an hour. And I think that's why his transition has been so easy. You've seen the scoring, you've seen him play well in the PK. Whatever he's asked to do, he's going to do it 100% to the best of his abilities. And that shows night in, night out, anytime you watch him. So Cardwell, I tweeted out the other night, he's going to play more NHL games than you expect. He's probably among the forwards. I think he's going to be right there with guys who are knocking on the door to be the first call-ups. And then Collin Graf, I know it's probably a little disappointing, especially a guy who played NHL games last year to start the season on the Barracuda, but I think it's the best thing for him, right? As a guy, kind of like the Luca Cagnoni thing, right? Yeah, he got a little bit of time last year in the Sharks, but that Sharks team was, right, it was 23-24 Sharks. Letting him, a guy who's very mature, right? He's played in college hockey, like his assists, I think he's going to do really, really, really well. But just letting him get some reps and big time minutes playing on this Barracuda team and kind of continue to iron out. I think just gain some confidence too. Not to say that he wasn't playing with confidence, but just to continue to gain some confidence. And I think score, I think he'd probably feel really nice to score one here. But yeah, I think Collin Graf is the best thing for him. Let him kind of to marinate down there. And we've seen what he can do. And I think for him to continue to grow his game, playing in the AHL is the best spot, especially with, again, this Barracuda team, Podorowski, you got Cardwell, Bissett, who looks like a freaking monster already. He had 4 points over the weekend. I know it's preseason, but still 4 points over the weekend. If Holton, it looks like he's going to stick around, at least for the moment. Like this Collin Graf's going to fit in really nice playing with some of these guys as well. So, and then guys who made the bubble, who kind of made it, I think for Gushchin, right, is the biggest one of those guys. I think for him, he just needs to continue to play the way he played in the preseason of that. If you're not scoring, what else can you do for me? We know Gushchin can score. We know he can help produce offense. That's his number one trait, but it's that other stuff of, can you play hard in the defensive zone? Can you be tough to play with on the walls? Full 200-foot game, tough in the corners, yada, 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 coach speak. But that stuff is going to be the reason you're playing and the reason you're not playing. So, I think him, Costin, Giovanni Smith, Delander, Grunstrom, those are kind of, like on college basketball, they have your last 4 in, last 4 out, like that. Those are your guys right there that are among the forwards of who's going to kind of need to continue to work hard that way to solidify your spot as the season goes on. So we'll talk about some flexibility, how kind of some of the moves I think the Sharks could make to gain some flexibility here. And then we'll go over the lines that we saw at practice today and kind of expectations as we head into the first game on Thursday night against the Blues. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for candidates isn't a search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. So join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of the show can get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Let's go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, let's finish up by talking about some flexibility and kind of those last guys in, right? And honestly, I think the Sharks are going to have to waive somebody because we don't expect Celebrini, Smith, Eklund to go anywhere, right? Eklund's proved himself. He's an NHL player. He's not going back to the Barracuda. He does not need to go back to the Barracuda. He's too good to go back to the Barracuda. Celebrini and Smith, like those guys are earned their spots. They're going to be playing NHL games. That is the best spot for them. You could make the argument Will Smith should maybe play some games with the Barracuda. I think the Sharks want to give him a good long run and see what happens and then make a decision from there. So those are your only forwards who are waivers exempt. And that leaves and then you have Danil Gushchin, also waivers exempt. So you could send him down if you need to. I still think he's outplayed a lot of the guys kind of in the bottom 6 here. So I think you have to look at guys like Giovanni Smith, Ty Dellandrea, Grundstrom, and Clean Costin as like your potential waiver guys. So with all these guys, you would have to subject them through waivers. You wait 24 hours to see if someone claims them. If someone claims them, they take the full salary and that person becomes that team's property, right? Just like we saw with Ty Emerson, the Sharks claimed him from the Rangers last year. The Sharks have claimed several players, Mikey Eyssimont famously, et cetera, et cetera. Of those guys, like Giovanni Smith, he makes the most sense to me because you look at the bottom 6, right? And it's like your Luke Cunnins, your Nico Sturms, your Grundstroms, your Dellandreas, all these guys, and they all kind of play the same role. I know Giovanni Smith may be a little bit more of a fighter than these other guys, but none of these other guys, like they're all tough guys. Like Luke Cunnin has gotten to his fair share of scraps. Barclay Goodrow is not afraid to get out there and do what he needs to do. Grundstrom, like all these guys they know their role, right? Smith also makes the least amount of money at $800,000. So like maybe that entices another team to be more apt to pick him up because of that. But I just don't think he's really put enough on tape that you'd have to worry about it. If he were to go if you did put him on waivers. And there's nothing against Giovanni Smith. It's just I like the other guys better, and I can see their roles are defined a little bit more. And I think they've done more with their playing time. Like Ty Dellandrea, I've really enjoyed his game, and I think also for him, the flexibility of being able to play center and play wing is a nice thing. And we've seen, I thought he played really solid in the preseason. I think he's going to have a really defined role. Carl Grundstrom with his forward checking and his ability to kind of just play a simple, straight, heavy game that we know Mike Greer and Ryan Warsofsky want to add to this team, especially after the past couple seasons of being, a team that's very easy to play against. I think Rundstrom makes this team a lot harder to play against. And Klim Kostin, who Ryan Warsofsky himself said, like, we need to see more out of him. Yeah, we've seen his scoring, but again, when you're not scoring, what else can you do for me? He, of those guys I kind of mentioned, does have the highest cap hit at $2 million. If he did clear waivers, I think it's about 750 or 850, somewhere around there. I forget the exact amount that would be on. I think it's maybe like 1.125, I think is what you can clear, and the rest would stay on your cap. So again, it's not like the Sharks need the cap space. They have plenty of cap space. I think their cap hits a little over $9 million right now. But those are the guys, and I wouldn't be surprised if by Thursday, Friday, one of these guys gets waived as you try to give yourself some flexibility, because once they go through waivers and if they're down in the AHL, you can bring them back up. And then I think it's like X amount of games or 30 days before you would have to subject them to waivers again. And with these quality of player, I don't think anybody's like kind of clamoring for these types of guys, right? Like Ty Dellandrea, the Sharks got from a trade. Dellandrea and Grundstrom, the Sharks got from a trade. I'm sure the Sharks weren't the only teams looking, asking about these guys. I'm not. Klim Kostin was kind of a throw-in, just kind of a random trade last season. I don't think any of these guys are going to be like you're sweating about it. And if they get claimed, then they get claimed. And you know what that does? It just opens up a roster spot for one of your, a guy like Gushchin to make a larger impact, or be able to bring up an Ethan Cardwell or a defenseman, as you're going to need defensemen here. So if one of these guys gets claimed, yeah, it stinks, but I think in the long run, it's going to be for your benefit, as you're going to be kind of forced to play with some of these other guys. So really quickly, let's go through the lines. So Max Miller, I think, had the lines. Let me pull. I had him and I lost him. So lines from today, and also the power play lines, which are always a nice little reminder of who's going to be in and who's going to be out, because you're not going to practice power play time with a guy who's going to be out. So the lines today: first line, Macklin Celebrini, Toffoli, which we have seen for a good chunk of the preseason. Second line, Granlund, Smith, Zetterlund. Interesting that they're still having Smith there, but keep an eye on if Granlund is the one taking draws and then they kind of flip-flop. That's something I'm going to be really watching on Thursday night. Third line, Cunnin, Wenberg, Goodrow. Fourth line, Gushchin, Sturm, Dellandrea. And then your fifth line right now, so these would be your scratches, would be Giovanni Smith, Klim Kostin, and Carl Grundstrom. So Sturm, I think for him, like, great centerman. That fourth line is kind of spicy to me. If you got Gushchin and Dellandrea, if you flopped the wingers, so it was like Gushchin, Wenberg, Dellandrea, and then Cunnin, Sturm, Goodrow, I'd be really happy there. And then defensively, we had Wallman, Ceci, with Mukhamadullin kind of running through there as well. Ferraro, Ruda, Thrun, Benning as well. And then the power play. First power play unit: Wallman, Celebrini, Granlund, Toffoli, Zetterlund. Then power play 2: Henry, Thrun, Danil Gushchin, Will Smith, Wenberg, Eklund. So interesting, Eklund starting the season on the second power play unit, but we'll let that play out here. So that is your opening night roster. No changes can be made for our Wednesday. No, you can't send anybody down. You can call people up, but that is your opening night roster. So we'll be back tomorrow, scheduled to have a guest. Should be good to go, but can have a guest and then on Thursday we'll have bold predictions. I'll come up with some dumb bold predictions that are 100% going to be wrong and 100% better than Frank Cervalli's, because that was a mess. Anyway, make sure you're following wherever you get podcasts, and of course you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter at MyFryHole. Till tomorrow. Bye, friends.